Hello and welcome to this new Android development tutorial. This is part 1 of how to make a camera application for Android. So we will start by opening our Android Studio IDE and then we will click on Start a new Android Studio project. We will select Empty Activity, we will click on Next, and as the name for this application we will write Camera. Okay? We make sure the selected language is Java and the minimum API level will be 15. We can change that later though. Okay, so we're gonna click on Finish right now. We will wait for the IDE to load the project so we can start working on our project. I will use an emulator to run the app so you can see what I'm doing and the changes it takes when I code. So basically we will be using the API 1 of camera as the first camera course because it is easier, is less complex, and gives you an overall idea on how camera works on Android. There's also camera 2, but it's way more complicated, so we won't dive a lot in that. So now that the project is loaded, what we will do is we will change the default layout file with a new one. To do that, we will open the RAS folder here on the left side. Then we will go and open the layout folder and we will delete the activity main.xml. To do that, we right click on this file and click on delete. If we have these options checked, we will uncheck them and then click in OK. So now the file should be deleted. We will actually create that file again but with a different structure. To do that, we will right click on the layout folder, go to new layout resource file, and here we will type as name activity main, so the same name it was previously. But on root element we will change the current one with linear layout. We will click on OK, and now the IDE has generated this new file for us. We will switch this file to text right here, and here is where we will code the UI of our application. Okay, so in Android, if we want to access hardware features like the camera, we need to ask for permission. So we're gonna open our manifest or Android manifest.xml file, and we will write uses permission and we'll type camera. Okay, after we do this, we are telling the system that we will use the camera permission for our application. Okay, right now we have to ask for permissions actually in code. Okay, so what we will do is we will go to our main activity.java file and we will start checking for permissions at runtime, right? Okay, so what we will do is we will override the onResume method. For that we're gonna type @override protected void onResume. We will open the method and we will type super.onResume, which is basically calling the super method of the class. Next, we will check if the current version is the same as or greater than Android Marshmallow. To do that, we will do the following. We type if build dot version, it's capital with capitals, so versions. Oh, make sure you import the build right here. Okay, version and that SDK int. Okay, if this version is greater or equal than build that version code that m. This is basically saying if this version is greater or equal than Marshmallow. Why do we check that? Well, because Marshmallow and later require us to ask the user for permission. So only if this if a statement is true, we will ask for permissions. Okay, so as you may think, we have to define the permissions that we will be asking for. Okay, so to define the permissions, the Android operating system requires us to define an array of strings. To do that, we're gonna create it as a global variable. So we will type private static final string array. Okay, and we'll call it permissions. Let me write it correctly. So permissions. Okay, and we will set this, of course, remember to end the line with a semicolon. And inside these, we will specify the permissions we want to ask for. In this case, is the camera permission, so just one. To specify permission, we will do the following. Manifest that permission that camera. Okay? We don't really need to end it with a semicolon, I think. Let me see. No, we don't really need to end this with a semicolon. So we have now our permissions specified, as you can see. But we also have to specify a request permissions code. For that, we will gonna say private static, private static final request. This is an int type, so we're gonna say private static final int request permissions. We will set this to basically any number. It can be 3 or 34, for example. It doesn't really matter, it's just the code and identifier. Okay, so after we've done this, what we will do is we will check only if the permissions are denied, because as you may know, the onResume method is called every time the user returns to the app. So we want to be asking permissions if we don't need to. So we have to create a method that will check if the permissions are denied, and only then we will ask for permissions. To create a method, we will write the following. Private boolean are permissions denied. Okay, we open the method and we create a for loop. Okay, in this case we have only one permission, so it's way easier, but we will write the method in a way we can extend it later for more permissions. For example, we want to write the image to the device storage, so we will also need a storage permission in the future. So right now we will specify an int, a global int variable that will store the number of permissions. To do that, we're gonna say private static final int permissions count. And in this case, since we have only one, we will set this to 1. Okay, so we go back to our permissions denied method, and we don't have to end it with a semicolon. So right here, we will create a for loop that will check if the permissions we want are denied or granted. Okay, so we're gonna go and write the for loop for int I equals 0, I less than permission count I plus plus. Oops, there was a typo here. It's not package manager. It's permission count. Okay, permissions count. Great. Now, this will be run as a for loop every time we're checking for each permission. And what we'll do every time will be if check self permission, we will pass permissions at I, so index I. So if that check self permission returns something that is different than permission granted, we will know that permission has been denied. Okay, so package manager that permission granted. If it's different than permission granted, we will return true, which means permissions are denied. And if the for loop ends without returning, we will return false, which will mean permissions are not denied. As you may notice, we have a warning right here that says call requires API level 23 and current minimum is 15. We don't really care about this because we are calling this method only when API level is 23 and above. So we can click on this warning icon and we will click on suppress, add suppress lint new API annotation, and this basically ignores the warning because we are calling it only when it's safe. Okay, so right here, if build that version that SDK int is greater or equal than build that version codes that m, so if it's more marshmallow or greater, and we will also check if permissions are denied. So we have two conditions here, and if both conditions are true, we will ask for permissions. So we're going to say and are permissions denied. So if those both checks are true, we will ask for permissions. Okay. So how do we ask for permissions? Well, it's simple. We only say request permissions. We will pass the permissions we want to request. Oops. Permissions and the request permission code, which we called request permissions. Okay. And after this, we will return because we don't want to keep initializing the app if we don't have permissions. So these request permissions will show the user a dialog in which the system will ask the user for permissions, and the user can either tap on allow permission or not. Okay, but the result of that dialog is what we will handle right now. To do that, we're gonna write at override, and then we're gonna say public void on request permission result. Okay, and the parameters of these will be the following. The first one is an int which contains a request code, so you can say request code. The next one is actually the permissions, so these parameters are passed when this method is called. So the first was request code, the next one is string array permissions. Okay, the next one is grant results, which are the results that will tell us if the permission was granted or not. So it is an int array which will be called grant results. We open the method and we will call the super method too. So that we're gonna say super dot on request permission result. So we have a typo right here in the method name. On request permission is permissions, so we type an S, and we call the super method as follows: on request permissions result, and we will pass the parameters we receive from the method call. So the first one will be request code in the same order, of course. The next one will be permissions, and the next one will be, of course, grant results. Okay, great. Now, right here, we will check if the permissions were accepted or not by the user. So to do that, we first want to check if the request code we send is the same that we are receiving here. So you're going to say if request code equals to request permissions, and we will also check if we don't have an empty result. So you can say if grant result that length is greater than 0. So if these two conditions are true, then we can go ahead and check the permissions state. To do or make our lives a lot easier, we will call the method we already created. To do that, we're going to say if are permissions denied. This means the user has denied the permissions, otherwise the user has accepted them. So what we will do if the permissions are denied, so since this is a camera application and the permission we're asking is camera, if the user denies that permission, then the app is not usable at all. So we have to basically, we cannot do anything if we cannot go forward if the user doesn't accept the permission. So we will close the app and enable the app to keep asking for permissions when the user opens the app again. To do just that, we will do the following. We will open two parentheses right here, and in the inner one we will type activity manager. Okay, then we go to the outer parenthesis and we're gonna say we'll open another one because we are using this activity manager to cast the result of these that get system service activity service. Okay, and after these three parentheses we will write that clear application user data, which will of course clear the user data, as you can see. And after we do that, we can say recreate, which is basically exit the app or something like that. Okay, and that's it. As you can see, we have a warning right here, right? Which says call requires API level 19. But again, this will be only called API if API level is 23 or above. So we're gonna ignore the warning by clicking on this icon and then on suppress linked new API annotation. As you can see, the warning is silenced, and now that was if the user denied, but if the user accepted or allowed the permission, we will call the onResume method. So the onResume method will be called again, and this time the permissions will be actually allowed, so we can continue with the initialization of our application. Okay, which is great. Now, in order for us to know if we have initialized it previously, we will create a global variable. So we're gonna type private boolean is camera initialized. So is camera initialized, and this is as default is set to false. So after this if statement, if bracket right here, we will check if camera initialize is false, so if this camera initialize is false, we will initialize the camera. Okay, great. So right now I will run the app on my emulator so we can see that the permissioned requests are working. Okay, so while this is loading, I will talk a bit about how the camera will work. Okay, so basically the camera accesses an API that is made available by the Android operating system, which enables us to access the camera object, to open the camera, to close the camera, to take photos, to change the modes of the camera, and to request some features of the camera like filters, exposures, autofocus in the case the camera has autofocus, and that sort of stuff. Okay, so basically what we want to do here is create a camera object on code that will enable us to use the real camera of our device. Okay, great. So to do that, we have to create a camera object, right? To create a camera object, we will use Java, but we will also use the XML file in which we will display the camera preview to the user. So the user, of course, needs that to check if the camera is working as expected. Okay, so what we will do now, we have an error that says error launching activity, so let's try it again to check if it works. Hopefully it will work now. Sometimes the emulator has bugs, so it doesn't work at the first time. But we have again another error right here, which I'm not really sure why this is. Let me check right here. So if we go to error right here, I can maybe check what's going on with this. Let me minimize this window. Oops. Okay. And I will run the app again to check if I can get the actual error as it occurs. So we have an error launching the activity. Okay. There's a lot of things that are not that clear right here. Okay, so let me check, maybe we did something wrong previously. So we have our manifest, which looks great. And the main activity of the Java also looks great. So let me run the app again to check if everything at least works. And we still have an error about launching the activity. Default activity not found. Maybe the activity name is wrong or something. Let me see. So apparently everything works fine, should be fine. Let's see if the app is at least installed on the emulator. Okay, let's see right here. So the app is not even being installed right now. So I think the problem is the emulator itself. So it's not my error, it's the error of the emulator. So to try to fix this, I will restart the emulator, so hopefully it will work now. So as I was telling you, we want to access the camera object from code. Okay, so to access it, we will use the camera API level 1 in this case, which, as I told you, is way more simple and easy to use. Okay, the emulator is being restarted now, and we will wait for it again a bit to see if we can continue. Okay, so we can go, while we wait for that, we will go to our Android Studio project, and we will go to our main activity.java. And we were on the onResume method, as you might remember right here. and we was checking if the camera was initialized. So the camera object I was talking about can be accessed as follows. So we're going to say private camera, and we can call it, so let's import this camera of hardware. Okay, and I will call this M camera, and for safety reason I will set this to null. Sometimes another app can maybe using the camera, so we cannot open it, so we declare it to null. So that's the object we will use. So if I run the app right now, hopefully it will work this time. Okay, let's see, installing APK and launching activity. And as you can see, the camera application has launched right now. So great, it is working as we expect. So of course it was an error of the emulator. So to access the camera, we will use this mCamera object right here. Okay, which is great. So that's basically it for this video. In the next one, we will actually initialize the camera and continue experimenting and learning how to set up a camera. I hope you enjoy it, and I see you in the next one. Bye.